Welcome to Trial Site News Podcast Series. Today we will be talking about Taproot Health. Founded in 2018, it's a data-as-a-service enterprise uniting all oncology stakeholders in launching a transparent marketplace, which is powered by a patient and clinic-centric model of shared data and revenue mediated through proprietary methods and technology. And here to talk with us about Taproot Health is Dane Dickson, MD, CEO, and founder at Taproot Health, and Rebecca Owens, Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder of Taproot Health. So Dane and Rebecca, welcome.
Adrian, thank you. It's a pleasure being with you today. Thanks for having us on your podcast.
Yeah, the pleasure is ours. We're excited to talk with you about Taproot. And so on that note, let's deep dive in. And for those who may not know who or what Taproot is, can you explain how it got started and what the focus of Taproot is?
Thank you for having us. So the problem in the industry in oncology is we have had significant advancements in oncology and patient care. However, we're still losing over 600,000 patients a year, and those rates are increasing. And when we look at that, we look at the progress of what we've done scientifically, which has been astounding. We still have this increased rate of mortality in cancer patients. And so as Dane and I look at the problem of oncology care and treatment and testing of patients, the issue is that data is not readily shared amongst physicians and researchers to really advance, whether it be the testing of patients or pharmaceutical development or clinical trials. We just don't have the depth of data that's being cross-shared amongst industry stakeholders to make these advancements at a more rapid pace. For example, new novel testing, diagnostic testing in the what we call biomarker testing is taking us at least 7 to 10 years to get approval for reimbursement of those tests that would be readily available to patients in the clinic to be tested so that we can best understand their tumor and potential therapeutic target. And on the other side of it, we've got novel therapeutics that are taking us a good, again, 10 to 12 years to bring them at a very high cost to the clinic because of lack of data to get these drugs approved and show efficacy of these drugs so that patients, again, can have access to these novel therapeutics. And because of also the data problem, we also aren't identifying enough patients quick enough in clinical trials. Just as a side note, clinical trial accrual rates are less than 4% of all cancer patients actually go on trial, which is, when you think about the breadth of the problem, that we have 1.7 plus million patients diagnosed with cancer each year and over 600,000 patients dying each year. That's a really terrible rate of accrual of identifying patients who would qualify for clinical trials.
Right.
So when Dane and I think about that problem, it's a massive problem, and we see that it's not because there hasn't been advancement in testing or in treatments or innovative trial models. It's that there is a huge lack of data, of quality data, to really make these advancements.
How then would you describe the fundamental problem that Taproot is addressing?
So Taproot Health was started in 2018 as a company that could unite the individual stakeholders in the oncology space and work together and in a unified fashion collect the quality and quantity of data that could then be widely available to help people solve these problems we just talked about. And the problem that we could see, as Rebecca said, is there's huge inefficiencies in the way that people collect data. And there's a lot of data that, although it's being collected, doesn't have the quality that is necessary to really answer scientific questions. And so when we started Taproot Health in 2018, it was with a group of very well-known academic thought leaders and others who came together and said, if we were going to build something that could collect high-quality data and do it in a way that could really advance both diagnostic testing and therapeutic options, what would it look like? And how would it need to be run? How would it need to be organized to help others to be able to participate with this, including both academic and community centers coming together? And the result of that is a startup company known as Taproot Health that was started by Rebecca and myself about 18 months ago.
So tell us then, what are some highlights or goals that Taproot has achieved so far?
I'll just highlight two. First, on January 9th, 2020, the journal Cell published a paper that introduced a brand new clinical trial type. And Adrian, it's amazing to us that very few people seem to notice the power of what we published on January 9th. And what we published is saying if there was a way to really advance precision oncology particularly, how could you do it? And what we introduced was this new clinical trial type, a master observational trial that explains how data should be organized and put together and how it could then be used to integrate with clinical trials and through biomarker discovery in kind of a blueprint that can be used to rapidly advance precision medicine. So that's one of our biggest highlights. The second highlight was on January 2nd, we announced the coming together of 3 very large academic medical centers and 2 community centers as just cornerstone partners to show proof of concept that what we described in the paper could be actually applied to a trial. And so we announced 5 centers that have agreed to come together and help us launch the master registry of oncology outcomes associated with testing and treatment. Its acronym is ROOT, R-O-O-T, and launching this as a clinical trial that puts together the information, real world information, in a way that allows quality and quantity of it to be collected at scale, that then could be used to advance the problem and solve the problems that Rebecca talked about.
Gotcha. So then, as you just mentioned, there's 2 things I want to talk to you about there. So let's first start with the journal Cell. So as you mentioned, Taproot had a new type of trial described and published in the journal Cell. Can you share more information about this new type of trial?
So master protocols have been used to advance interventions in the oncology space. So for example, the NCI MATCH trial. It was one protocol that would allow a common testing method to then identify patients that could go on to a very specific drug to determine if that drug had benefit in one line of therapy. What we did is we said, okay, master interventional protocols have been very powerful. How would we apply a master protocol to real world data? And we then said, let's go through and let's apply some of those same principles. Let's do it in real world data in a way that we could look at different testing methods, different treatments, but with standardized methods and standardized outcomes and organized in a longitudinal fashion that would allow us to really understand many layers of precision oncology that we couldn't find any other way. And so what we did is, Adrian, what amazes me is science has always been, let's take on something that we already know is of scientific quality and let's add to that. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to say, let's go through and let's use real world data that has very few standards and is quite variable in its quality. And then we're trying to use that information to identify advances in cancer care. And we've done some amazing things with those unstructured real world data sets, but we have not built these structured real world data sets that are going to be necessary to really understand some of the more complex questions inside of oncology that could not be identified any other way. And so in essence, the master observational trial is a trial type that is necessary to really advance precision oncology, not just by identifying one biomarker and one drug, but by looking at many biomarkers and many drugs and putting them together to try to identify what we need to do to answer questions that are not being answered any other way.
So then let's shift gears a little bit to the Master Registry of Oncology Outcomes Associated to Testing and Treatment, or ROOT, as you mentioned. A national oncology master trial and what your firm believes to be a cornerstone to building a national oncology database. Could you break this down for the Trial Site News audience?
So if we're going to really understand precision medicine or precision oncology, we know we need a lot of data. Every tumor is unique. And because of this, we don't need hundreds of patients or even thousands of patients. We need tens of thousands of patients. And there really is not one center or one group that is large enough in the nation or even the world to do this alone. And so what Root is doing is saying, let's bring together academic centers that are very large, but also community centers that can be very small. And let's work together using a common protocol, looking at common data elements, looking at simplified methods of entering the most crucial data in a way that we can build data sets that then can be accessed by many individuals to then find answers that we couldn't find any other way. So Root is the vehicle that is allowing these people to come together and do it in a very scientifically stringent way. Rebecca, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add that is also when we distinguish the master observational trial versus Root, they're synonymous for us, but Root really is the database warehousing all the data that these sites are contributing as they're following the patients per the patient consent and allowing that robust access. Additionally, the testing side of things is all standard of care per the physician's choice. And so the physicians aren't doing anything outside of their routine care of that patient. So therefore, it's any biomarker testing that's performed on that patient. For example, next generation sequencing, or even single biomarkers, let's say like a PD-L1 that has immuno-oncology implications. And so we are not biased to any of that. It is up to the physician, and we collect all of the biomarker testing as well.
So Adrian, to kind of, if I was going to give a synopsis, a master interventional trial, what we understand are basically a series of phase 2 clinical trials that have been linked together by one protocol. What the master observational trial is doing is linking multiple observational studies, prospective observational studies underneath one protocol and underneath one trial type. And just as the master interventional trials can add arms to add new treatments, what the master observational trial or Root in the oncology space can do is add multiple additional trials to look at how, as Rebecca said, how are we introducing new diagnostic testing? How are we using new treatments and put it all together in a scientific fashion? But then we can also attach to this an interventional trial, for example, or we can Root can then act as the, kind of the same thing that is being used by Match as a screening tool to then fill an interventional master protocol. And so Root allows us to then build, use this observational data to then lead into interventional trials or lead into more advanced observational trials by the way we have built this trial to act in a modular fashion and be able to add or subtract modules. But as Rebecca said, they're all, according to standard of care, thus an observational study.
Right, and you're not adding extra workload for the doctors themselves, which is another plus.
Exactly.
So with all that being said, then, what does the future of precision and or AI incorporated care look like for Taproot?
So Taproot, we look at ourselves as a data collection company. And we see that what happens with our data is that others can use that data to help build algorithms or help determine new drugs or new diagnostics. And so our job is to facilitate others to then build knowledge. The lack of data has made it very difficult for people to then take the next steps. And so our job, and when we see what's the future of Taproot, Taproot's future is to help everyone advance what they're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I might add as well, there's been plenty of publications on real world data and port quality. And real world data is just, at this point in time, in my thinking, is a buzzword. And so the way that we're approaching it is the only way that you can have real world data is to put some scientific construct around that, which we look at as the master observational trial. And then furthermore, to be able to audit that data in a very stringent way and then make it very usable for the things that Dane talked about for applying AI tools or other sophisticated analytics tools. And More recently, there was an article that came out from the CEO of Novartis basically saying we have made significant advances in technology, but we have forgotten that physicians don't do these things at the point of care. And so how do you incorporate into the mainstream of the point of care in which you can get the highest quality of data so that we actually can apply these tools so that we can have a better understanding of the biological nature of the patients or the patient's tumors in this case? And so what we've done is we've really focused on what is it going to take to acquire the highest level of quality data so that you actually can get to real world data.
But also, as we've said, it's got to be done in a way so that we don't burden the physicians in such a way that they won't want to collect that data. And so it's kind of that, quality of data doesn't mean necessity. We've got to collect every piece of data. The master observational trial has said, what are the most important pieces of data that don't exist in electronic medical records? And let's focus on collecting those rather than collecting everything that is there. Let's collect what's most important and may not be in that record right now. Adrian, you asked the question, what does the future hold for Taproot Health? What we hope to also see is that many institutions will recognize the power of coming together underneath one common environment. And an environment where academic centers and community centers can come together in the same initiative, collecting data that is of very high quality and being able to work together in a collaborative fashion to find answers that may not be able to be identified because there's not lack of data or the data that is available does not have sufficient quality to answer questions that people will want to ask.
Right, and you guys are definitely on the right track there. And then as you mentioned, doctors not using all their tools at point of contact there. So for our audience, would you care to expand on why is it so important that patients have personalized care?
Every patient is different. Every person is, and we know this biologically, is different. And whatever turns on those tumors or the growth of cancer is very unique, whether it be, we've seen studies on environmental factors, we see familial factors, we see stress, nutrition, all of these things, and it's not the same from person to person. And so
Right.
if we're going to get to quote unquote personalized treatments and personalized care, we have to, in this country, understand what is precision medicine and can we show efficacy at a broader level of patients that look like each other. And each of those patients that look like each other are very difficult to find. And that is why we have to increase the utilization of testing per standard of care, which today we have Medicare has finally approved next generation sequencing in a more broad use. And we're still seeing that 30 to 40% of patients just simply aren't being tested. So we see that Taproot Health model, promotes the, standard of care and requires that these patients are tested in order to be enrolled in our study. And then from there, then we're starting to look at, which patients are similar. But if we don't have them in a central repository and we don't have the ability to identify patients that look like each other, then we just simply won't get to personalized care.
And Adrian, there just recently people have said the rate of cancer death is going down. That is true because we've done better screening methods and we've introduced some advances in precision medicine. The problem is that because we've got an aging population, the number of patients are actually that are dying of cancer is increasing. And we don't know what to do with the vast majority of those patients. We know what generally may work or may generally buy some time, but we really don't know how we're going to treat this patient whose tumor is completely different than another patient to really try to identify a cure. And one of the things we've said multiple times inside of Taproot Health is it's always about the patient. And any goal that's less than a cure is not an appropriate goal. We need to work together to try to identify a treatment for each patient, not just a small subset of patients that may have one alteration. We need to identify what will help all these people.
So then let's shift gears then. Let's talk about Taproot as a business. So what is the Taproot business model?
So Taproot was started it's a startup company, and it was started with bootstrapping to get to a place where it could bring groups together without being encumbered by relationships or other groups that may influence its scientific integrity.
Right.
So what the Taproot business model has been is let's bring centers together and help them to collect data in an efficient and scientifically stringent manner. And then as the centers collect this information, Taproot will provide them an administrative fee to help them be able to keep themselves whole as they're collecting the information. But then as Taproot collects these data sets and makes these data sets available to individuals to do research on this through a transparent, physician-centered marketplace, that then as those licenses, those data sets are licensed, when Taproot receives money from that, we give back to the clinics in a very transparent fashion a revenue share based on what that data is worth. And so the clinic gets reimbursed or gets paid or remunerated based on the quality, the quantity, and the value of the data that is ultimately being used. And this money is not meant, Adrian, for anyone to become rich. What we're doing is seeing that this money is going back into centers to help them do more research and help them to continue to do the research projects that they currently are not able to do because they don't have enough funding in the research departments. And so with an upfront administrative fee and then a shared revenue model on the back end, this provides benefit to both academic and community centers who want to participate in research like this but have not been able to because it's just not been financially doable for them because of other competing interests.
So then on that note, has Taproot raised sufficient capital, or is it currently set for funding?
So Taproot has been very careful in how we've approached funding because we've wanted to stay independent. And so Taproot has been able to get to this point and get to the launching of the registry and the signing of memorandums of understanding and getting to contracting with some of these early sites and starting to enroll patients. But as we expand into other centers and as we see more people coming on, we are going to need to obtain further financing. And what we are looking for right now are like-minded investors who want to really transform oncology research. They really want to make a difference in how we work together in a unified fashion to advance cancer research. And so we are currently looking for very important investor partners that can come in and can work with us to make our vision a reality.
So then let's talk about Taproot and its opportunities for the future as we move forward. What would you say would be the top 3 opportunities as we move into 2020?
So when we talk of opportunities, we can bunch them into different areas. Opportunity 1 is the expansion of the protocol into multiple different sites to give patients the ability to have their data be collected in a way that makes a difference. I mean, that is the opportunity that we always must remember. 2, we see that there's opportunities to start early collaborations with groups like pharmaceutical companies or laboratory testing companies that want to find better ways and different ways of identifying early targets or be able to expand their clinical trial presence. We want also the opportunity is to get those 96% of patients that are not going on clinical trials. Our job is to not disrupt what is happening in current clinical trial environments. Our job is to try to identify more patients that can increase the number of patients that go on trials. And so we see with our partners and with our centers working together to try to get to a much higher penetrance of both testing of patients, but also of treating those patients through either currently approved standard treatments or through new clinical trials that other groups are already running or plan to run, and just helping attach what we're doing to what they're trying to do as well.
So looking to the future for Taproot, how do you see the value of real-world data?
As we talk about today in real-world data, it is a very loose term, and there has not been enough scientific rigor put around or scientific construct put around the collection of real-world data. So as we think about the position of what Taproot Health is doing, and specifically the master observational trial, we're putting very stringent criteria around this data so that pharmaceutical companies and manufacturing companies and researchers have the highest quality of data to really understand what is going on with patients in the real clinical setting. And this would allow a pharmaceutical company, for example, to expand on a current indication that they may have for a drug, that as they want to go and apply for new indications under the FDA and need access to real world data, as we see many of publications that this is happening today, looking at sources of data to produce real world data and use that for new indications or claims. This is the type of data that's needed for manufacturing pharmaceutical researchers to go to the FDA and demonstrate whether it be the ability to expand an indication for risk factors, et cetera, in patient care.
And Adrian, one of the things I think people don't see is that a lot of real world data that is being used for research is not obtained through a patient consent. And there's some concerns that people have levied as we get into more detailed understanding of genetic markers and using of information that can be quite personal. Patients and institutions are concerned that if their data is being used for, even if it's for research by commercial entities without that patient consent, what are the implications of doing that? And so by having a patient consented high quality real world data set, we see a myriad of opportunities to collaborate with individual companies.
So thank you so much for talking with us today, Dane and Rebecca. This was an enlightening experience, and we'll certainly be keeping our readers, listeners, and viewers up to date on how Taproot's journey progresses. So thanks again for joining us.
Well, Adrian, thank you. And we would be very happy to talk to any group that would like to reach out to us. We are trying to build something that is collaborative. And so we are hoping that people will see the value of coming together as both centers and industry to build something that just does not exist today. And so we appreciate the time with you today.
Thank you, Adrian, also for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, for those of you in our audience who want to learn more, you can visit taprootco.com. That's TAPROOTCO.com, and links will be provided in the description below. And you can also find Trial Site News on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and the links will also be provided in the description below. So thanks again for joining us today, Dane and Rebecca. We really appreciate your guys' time. Really